Hello and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll be continuing our discussion about how to incorporate and implement the main user interface for the Battleship project. So let's get started and jump into the Unity editor. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Okay, guys, so before we actually jump into the Unity editor to do the actual design of the UI, let's take a look at the kind of like a wireframe layout of what we want to do. So here you would see that this represents the player's board where we are going to interact with it. But more importantly, what we want to concentrate on are these buttons that you see laid out on the screen over here. So this one over here will help us to uh, direct the orientation of the pieces. Down here, we have the 5 buttons that will represent each type of the ship that you're going to be placing onto the board. And then, of course, we have the restart and the exit buttons. Okay, so it's a pretty simple and straightforward layout. What we'll do is I'll group it into the top left corner, the top right corner, and the bottom left corner. Eventually, once the actual pieces have been placed onto the board, this panel, this is going to be grouped inside a panel. This panel is going to go away, and a new panel is going to come up, and the new panel is going to showcase the scores of the user and the score of the AI. Okay, so that's basically the gist of the actual um, main UI that we are going to design and implement. And now we can go ahead and switch over to Unity Editor and start doing the layout based on what we just discussed. All right, so now that we know what we are about to design, let's get going. So let's go ahead and create our canvas. Let's go ahead and change the name. Let's call it main canvas. And let's go ahead and create the actual containers. I like the groupings utilizing panels. This makes it easier to move a collection of UI elements that are kind of related to one another easier throughout the whole design process. So that's the main reason I utilize panels. So let's go ahead and create a panel. And let's call this uh, orientation. And this will be anchored to the top left corner. And of course, we need to go ahead and reduce, and let's make it 100 by 100. Maybe we change the size later on. And let's do a 50 by 50 or negative 50 in this case. In fact, let's go ahead and increase the size to 200 by 200, and we will offset it by half, which is 100 and negative 100. And probably we want to give it some padding as well. So let's do 110 and negative 110. All right, so that looks much better. So this will be the panel containing the orientation button. So let's name it accordingly. And let's go ahead and right click and say, go ahead and create a button. Okay, so here we have placed the button, but let's go ahead and click on play and make sure that the actual dimensions are not too overwhelming as far as the screen space is concerned. And it looks like this is kind of large for our play area over here. So let's go ahead and resize these buttons, make them a little smaller. That way they don't overlap the actual board where we need to interact with it. So I'm going to go ahead and click stop over here, come back, and maybe let's reduce this to, let's say 150 by 150. And of course, we'll reduce the uh, button to 140 by 140. And of course, we'll have to readjust our X and Y positions. So let's make it 80 by negative 80. Okay, that looks much better. Let's go ahead and click play again one more time. Yes, there we go. So it doesn't actually cover the board. Let's go ahead and create our next panel. But before doing that, let's go ahead and also call this BUT orientation, and probably also update the text to orientation. And of course, this will be replaced later by an actual icon. So let's go back to our main canvas. By the way, there's this 2D over here where you can utilize to visualize your canvas much better. When it comes to UI design, it's always a good idea to be in the 2D space rather than the 3D space, especially if you are doing screen space, right? So let's right click over here, go to UI again, and let's create our second panel. And our second panel is going to be responsible for the placement of the of our board pieces. So let's go ahead and make some adjustments over here. We are going to anchor it to the lower left corner. And we want to also reduce the width and height, maybe to something like 600 by 100. And of course, we'll have to readjust our displacement. 50, probably do it 60 over there. Okay, that sounds about right. So this would be the panel containing our buttons that we are going to utilize. In this case, since we have just some static buttons, we don't need to worry about dynamically generating this thing. So we're just going to build them and design them into the panel. So let's go ahead and rename this to panel board pieces. And then inside the panel, what we want to do is create our first button element. And let's just go ahead and create a button. And make this 90 by 90. And we want this to be aligned to the left. And probably we want this to be at around 50. So that will align it to the left and place it right there. In fact, what we can do is actually utilize a layout component. Let's see how that works in Unity 6. So let's call it a horizontal layout group. And we want this to be anchored to the middle left. And we want to add or the layout element to the button, so that way it knows that it belongs to it. And this will be 90 by 90. Everything else, let's keep the min width and min height to 90 and 90. And let's also give this some padding on the left and the right. So we say 5 pixels on the left, 5 pixels on the right. And similarly, top and bottom, and maybe we put like 5-pixel spacing between each one of these buttons. So what we can do is actually go ahead and create our 5 buttons representing the 5 ships. And let's go back here. And from the right side, we can increase this to 300. That will push it down, make sure that there's no spacing when we are auto-generating these buttons. And we see that we have extra space over here. So maybe we close this down to, like, for example, 500, or maybe like a 490, maybe 480. Again, you guys have to decide what works. Going back here, so 480 divided by 2, 290, probably, let's say about 245 would do it. All right, so 245, I think, should be fine for this particular thing. Let's see if you're fine. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons laid out at the bottom left corner of the UI. Each one of the buttons will represent one of these board pieces. And then let's go ahead and also create this exit and restart button layouts as well. So let's see how that's done. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just duplicate the orientation panel that we have, and we'll rename this to, let's call it the exit panel. And all we are going to do is change the anchor from the top left corner to the top right corner. And we'll also go ahead and displace this to negative. Let's see what the other one was, 80. So we'll displace this to negative 80. And the top Y displacement should be fine. And we can change the button to BUT exit. And let's go ahead and update the caption as well. And again, similarly, this is just temporary. All of this will be replaced by an actual texture representing the visual board piece itself. So let's go ahead and also create the button for the reset. So let's go ahead and duplicate our exit button. And let's call this BUT reset. And of course, right now, this is being on top of the exit. So we'll have to adjust its placement. So the exit panel can be also extended similarly like this. So our buttons are kind of 140 by 140. So we can say that the exit panel can be 300 pixels, and we can displace it by 160. And now the exit button, instead of being centered, you can actually anchor both of them to the mid center and then adjust their displacement on the x-axis accordingly. So this one would be -80, for example, and this one would be -160 or more. So let's go ahead and try 210, 220. Okay, so that kind of looks all right. If you do want to create the same spacing between these two buttons, then we can go ahead and increase the actual panel size and displace this by an additional 5 pixel. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's make this, for example, 310. You can keep the X, maybe increase it by 165. Or actually 160 was fine, but let's go ahead and reset this to -230. And now that will give us, or 225, that would give us a better spacing between these two particular buttons themselves. So here we go. So this would be our screen layout. In the next video, let's go ahead and click on play. Before we talk about what the next video will contain, the next video will start implementing some of the interactivity between this. Specifically speaking, we'll be interacting with the actual board piece UI buttons over here, where depending on your selection, you'll be able to visualize how that chip is going to be placed based on the orientation of the ship as well on the actual board. And that's what we will cover in our next episode. So let me go ahead and stop sharing. So thanks for stopping by. So in this particular episode, we saw how to do the basic layout of the UI. In our next episode, we'll see how to create the interactability of the UI and how to place the pieces onto the board based on the piece itself and the orientation. All right, thanks for stopping by. Make sure to like and subscribe, and see you guys soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.